swept that.
Okay. Yeah, no, this is what we need to know.
You know, quite honestly, we get very little back on our traffic fines anymore. It kind of got to be a joke to the extent that we didn't want to buy tickets anymore because they cost us too much money just for what we get back. We since went to Digiticket and, you know, it's more software based and stuff like that. But the truth of the matter is what the village gets back in traffic fines is pretty minimal. Yeah. For instance, like on a DUI arrest, the state police will get $350 out of our fine for DUI equipment fines. Well, that's great for the state police, that didn't have anything to do with our DUI arrest, and we get maybe $150 for DUI equipment, you know, fine, out of that, you know, whatever it is, fine. But that's just an example, you know. We get the very meager portion of the traffic fines. They go many other places, and then they kind of swept the funds, and, you know, some of the places that those fees go to, like the Illinois State Training, Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board, they swept that out of their hands also, so that funds our training for officers, and that money kind of disappeared, and they had to go back to the legislature and try and figure out some kind of Band-Aid, and there's still not really a good answer on that yet.
Questions for Chief regarding?
There's no way we can raise our fees on that if we get more.
On the traffic?
Yeah.
No, it's statutory.
It's just,
Yeah.
The only other thing that you could potentially do, we talked about in the past, is establish your own administrative court, start holding court ourselves, but that has costs associated with it. You have to pay a judge, essentially. You gotta get a judge. You gotta have an attorney, which is essentially a prosecutor.
there's your fees.
Huh?
There's your fees. Yeah.
That's a trade.
And the thing is in order to recoup those costs, you have to be active in terms of writing tickets and various things along those lines, which would be spread out over our community. Sherman residents, potentially. We're not trying to, you know, to do that to our citizens. So going forward on this line item, through March, through 11 months, we were at $10,052. That is annualized into $913 a month. So if you theoretically added another month to that, which I don't have the document in front of me that has, you know, through that month, but we'd be at $10,965, which is $11,000. Do you have reason to believe that we could hit $12,000 in fines versus last year coming in at right at $11,000? Or do you think basically last year's number?
There again, with the COVID, you know, the shutdown, everything slowed down. I mean, our calls for service even slowed down quite immensely when everybody was at home, you know, but I think that would have an impact.
Okay. So we should probably stick with actuals for last year, around 11, and it was $10,965, but I think to keep it simple, we'll do 11,000. Is everybody comfortable with that?
And this is all not knowing if we're gonna have another shutdown come October or
Right.
something, which we don't.
Okay, thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Now for fines, local,
These are dealing with ordinance violations, animal issues. You can see that number is very hard. As of March 31st, it was $7,328. Whenever we have a property that's going foreclosed on, I get real aggressive. And I fine like crazy, because I know that those corporations that are maintaining them, number one, they let them go, and you've seen it happen in the community. Number two is they hear from me immediately, I find out who they are, and I bill them, and they pay. Because they know that I will file a tax lien against them, put it on the property, and I'll get it either today or I'll get it then, plus interest. So I charge every possible thing that I can do. And so that's why you see that number so high. And we had 2 properties, one of the properties sold, so it's good to go now. The other one's being maintained better. I dropped that number down to $750, which is more of a realistic number. Although it's just like pass for $250, but the $750 is a very comfortable number.
I think that's way comfortable, isn't it?
I think that it'll be higher than that.
So if you look at that, I mean, we only appropriated like $250 last year, which I'm not so sure why we even did that low of an amount, but it is what it
It's
is.
based on history, I think.
Okay, so again, talking about how much stuff that the administrator is doing, just think about, put yourself in his shoes, how long it takes to write a letter. Lick, stick, stamp it, take it, drop it in the post office, all of that administrative time it takes to do that. He's spending a lot of time on that. That's why I'm trying to convince everybody, like, trying to get some additional help in the village hall, and to the extent that we can. Because that number could actually grow, if we can stay on top of administrative tasks even better, right? So, the actuals was $7,328.05. I don't know why you wanna keep it at $750. Do you think that
Well, I'm just trying to be realistic with what I know.
Well, because you don't know if you're gonna have a bad property or not, you know.
How many violations have I written up to date? I probably got, I don't know, I track every. I say that not right. Yeah, see, I've only got 15, I've got 15 violations on the books. And most of it have been resolved. A lot of times it's just, we're not having those progressive properties, although we do have one Sandy knows about. The ones that we do have, as soon as I notify them by letter, or I knock on the door, a lot of times that I just knock, I don't want to waste time. I go up there, I knock on the door, if they're home, I explain everything to them.
try to get
And
compliance?
then try to get voluntary compliance with them. If they're not home, I usually leave a door hanger, put one in their mailbox, and they'll call me. And I've had 2 calls Friday night at 6 o'clock. Hey, you got this door hanger, what's going on? So, really bad properties. But do I fine them right off the bat? No. If they don't comply within a certain period of time, yeah. Then I start initiating the clock starts ticking.
Yeah.
I try to be
That's
fair.
good, yeah.
If they can comply, that's great, but if we continue to have progressive problems with them, then I go backwards and say, okay, I'm done dealing with you, it's wasting too much time, we're gonna start fighting on that. So I don't imagine there's gonna be that much more happening, so that's why $750. If you wanna make it to 1,000 or 1,500, okay, I can try to work towards that goal.
Well, let's.
But it's like, how many more tickets does the chief wanna write to get to whatever number he wants to get to?
Well, I was just gonna say the same thing. It's unfortunate to try to think about that,
It is unfortunate,
but
but if we have one.
it could very well cause that
foreclosure
number to go
issue
up. Yeah.
in the next year.
But it takes a long time to get to that.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
it does
It takes a long time.
It does.
It's
Well, that's
like
like
years.
3 years, yeah.
We've got I get notification of every foreclosure that comes through.
So you are the boots on the ground, not knowing exactly the entire process of how long it takes for you to see a letter go out and a check come back in. What are you comfortable with?
So,
Are you guys comfortable with
The number you put
750?
out?
we
Yeah,
can do 1,500 if you, but
I am,
No,
because
we
we
don't-
don't
we
wanna
don't-
get stuff.
we don't
somewhere.
I always like to go low on the revenue side and then
No.
bring it in bigger
Yeah.
later.
I agree. So what do you want to keep it at 750?
750.
Yeah.
Again, we're in July. What do you say?
No, we were talking about the Woodsville project where we had.
Corner Pine.
That's one, they paid a lot of that.
I know we were out there all the time, up and down.
Yeah, weekends and everything.
I know they get
In
fined.
charge of debt. I got every dollar out of it.
We'll come back to the sales tax and income tax. Let's get these little ones out of the way. Income tax is pretty much already done, but, we'll talk about, we'll plug that number in a second here. Rent income for the sewer revenue fund. This is pretty much already established. There's nothing that essentially changed regarding that, so.
Well, what I will say to the board for the board purposes is, that number was always traditionally low. We were collecting about $5,300
Yeah.
a year. We did a market study last year to find out per square footage what a building like this would go for, and we charged them more. The auditors called me on it. They said, hey, how did that rate change? It went from $5,300 to over $20,000. I said, yeah, here's why, and I showed it to them, and they said, oh, I guess you guys should have done that a while back. I said,
And we should have been doing that for years
But,
and stuff. and
you
we
know, it's
started
just
doing it,
properly
we started
charging for
doing it.
that, based on square footage
Yeah.
and cost.
So we've been doing it for the last however many number of years.
It's
but
just one of
yeah,
those things you find.
That's another thing Mike did, is, like you said, a
Yeah.
market study, what's
I
per
took more
square
money out
foot.
of Bruce's budget.
So,
Thanks, Bruce.
so the sewer revenue fund pays the general revenue fund rent, right? And it should, because the general revenue fund owns this building. This is its space, it paid for it and all that stuff. the sewer revenue fund, which is a totally different operation. And Bruce Beal is the sewer department coordinator, and while we have a lot of crossover with, with Sean and his employees, what they do, a lot of towns, cities, municipalities have, director of the sewer department, director of public works. They're two separate and distinct bodies, right? Well, we don't necessarily have that right now. And I still want to potentially establish a sewer department that has its director, has its employees, and that's what they do. They take care of sewer issues. And then the public works side of things does all the other stuff. And there may be some crossover because we're so small. But that all being said, the sewer revenue fund, which is a user fee assessed on individuals for, using the sewer system, has equipment and has space that it needs. And so we charge that sewer fund to store items in this building. Otherwise, if it was its own standalone department, it would be paying, it'd have its own building, it'd have its own equipment and all that stuff. Well, so that's one thing that you can do, and that's another way that we get revenues into the general revenue fund, which helps offset the cost of our operations and the building that it actually uses. It can't just be free, right? And so it's being charged that. And so we established that, that is what it is. I don't think there's much discussion on that, but if anybody has any discussion, the chair to entertain anybody's discussion regarding this line item.
And also realize that these revenue streams are all general revenue funds. They're not special funds like sewer fund and motor fuel tax. Those are considered under different funds.
So that being said, through March was, I think we need to up it just a little bit, right? It was 22,400. Through March it was 20,533. That's like $1,800, $1,866 a month. Plus 22,400.
Yeah.
It's 22,399. It's 22,400.
So keep it the same.
Yeah. Everybody good with that?
Which way do
The 24.
Sewer revenue fund, rent income.
Oh, yeah.
22,400.
That's a fixed number. You're not gonna change it.
Yeah. The property tax.
That's based on last year's levy.
What's that?
That's based on levy, so that's exact.
Okay.
And don't worry about that $214,000 number. The one you see there for says 214, that includes the bond. It wasn't taken out on this sheet. So that bond's, at least one, little over 1%, I think, of that entire levy. The interest income, it depends on how much you need, but it's depends on your contingency.
So let's just go with last year's appropriation, right?
Yeah.
81,287.
Do you want to stay with 81?
For now. I may have to change that with everybody, but it didn't be very specific as to why. We'll just plug that for now. Interest income. 15,500 is what we had appropriated last year. Through 11 months, we were at $9,600. I think we could put 10,000 in there based on performance last year and what we anticipate for next year. Everybody okay with that? Liquor licenses, you gotta tell you, they're pretty much, it is what it is unless we can, we almost had a project that would have added to that.
Yeah.
You know about that, actually, several of you do. Yeah, Hair of the Dog, we added that liquor license to the roll, and that would have been another, but our liquor licenses, they're only $300, so, they've been that way since I was a trustee. We never increased those. I don't say to increase them, I'm just making that statement that $300, last year we got $3,350, we had appropriated $3,600. We actually did have a couple fall off, we had, no, we did.
Yeah, but what, before Tasty Cafe was Tasty
Yeah.
Cafe, they had a liquor license.
Yeah, Range 366, they had the liquor license because they had gaming machines, then they actually took them out, if you remember, and they got rid of, you have to have a liquor license in order to have the gaming machines. So that went away, so
So the
that's.
diner did that, they did that, right, with those this year?
They always have.
Did they?
Who did?
Fairlane?
Oh, yeah, I didn't know.
Because
Yeah.
they have to
Yeah,
do
Because
it.
they have
gaming
gaming.
machines,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, so,
Yeah, currently we have 11 liquor licenses out.
Yeah.
yeah, so
And they're
11
all
times three,
reduced, they're not new, they're all reduced.
so 11 times $300, $3,300.
It's an exact number. And those have already been paid.